This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, we are 1 week away from the NFL Draft. And Andrew DiCecco is getting giddy because I know it's like Christmas Day for him as the draft is almost here. We got plenty of draft conversation and thoughts from Andrew right now for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Andrew, 1 week away. We're getting close, man, and I know you are ready for this thing to happen, but a lot of conversation leading up to this, including, I want to start with this here with you, Andrew. There was a tweet yesterday from James Palmer who basically said the Eagles have met with pretty much all of the top corners in this year's draft. They've really done their work on the position, and at 22 could be in a good spot to land one. If you need a corner and you're at 22, Andrew, is that a spot that has a lot of options that you like?
Well, to me, it always has two options. And hello, Michael. Good to be with you today as we're sitting 7 days out from the NFL Draft. I think it's Nate Wiggins and it's Kool-Aid McKinstry that are sitting there at 22 and that are in that conversation. But moving further down the board is where I expect to find Kool-Aid McKinstry, given the Jones fracture. Yes, he did run a 4.47 and a 4.48. Despite that, at his pro day, which is pretty remarkable. But and I know I'm probably going to get some questions on Cooper DeJean, but Cooper DeJean is someone that I view as a safety, so there's a little bit of a caveat there. But those are the two players. I think there's more value at offensive line there. There's more of a steeper drop-off compared to where they'll be picking next at 50 or 53, whereas there's some high-level cornerbacks that should be available there at 50 or 53.
All right, so you're saying in your mind there's only two guys that will be there at 22?
Well, you never want to speak in absolutes when you're in terms of the draft,
sure,
as you know, but I think right now, projection-wise, Nate Wiggins and Kool-Aid McKinstry are the two guys that would fall within that range. And then depending on how you see Cooper DeJean, he might qualify as well. I really like him as a safety, though.
Anybody in that corner position that if they fall into what range you would move up for? Because if you've done your homework and you're the Eagles, and there's that one guy that you're keeping your eye on. And I asked this question. Bill Belichick yesterday was on the Pat McAfee show, and he said, look, you never know what any of these teams are going to do. You know, 1 year Logan Mankin's there. We never thought he'd be there, so we went and got him. Or he referenced Vince Wilfork as a guy they never thought would get to where they were. And they, so who's that guy that if he falls and he's at this number, Roseman has to pick up the phone and make the move?
For me, that's Terrion Arnold. I don't envision Quinyon Mitchell slipping past 12 or 15, but Terrion Arnold, for me, for some reason, maybe it's because he doesn't run a blistering 40 time that may force him down the board a little bit, but man, can he play. And one of my second-rated corner in the draft. But if he's within striking distance, 17, 18, you have to make an aggressive play for it. I would think if you're Howie Roseman, that would be the player to me. Troy Fautanu, given the level of importance on offensive line across the NFL, he's going to go a little bit earlier and probably be a little rich for the Eagles to trade up for. He's my favorite offensive lineman in this draft class. And I think going into the process, he probably would have been a custom fit for the Eagles at 22, but I just don't think that that's going to be in the conversation, given he's aced every single test throughout the pre-draft process, and he has the tape to go along with it. But you never know, but I think Terrion Arnold, to answer your question.
All right, who are a couple guys in your mind, Andrew DiCecco, because of the quarterback situation? I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks that might get overdrafted, and some guys that you think that could help Philadelphia push down a little bit. Are there guys that might have been drafted in the 10, 14 range, maybe Chop Robinson, or I don't know, do you take a look at a defensive tackle that maybe is higher up and they keep getting pushed down because of all these crazy quarterback rumors?
Yeah, I think J.J. McCarthy is going to get overdrafted. That's just my humble opinion. And like you said, talent always gets pushed down the board. And for me, the way I envision the board sort of unfolding, the Eagles are going to be in a spot where there's going to be an awful lot of enticing tackle prospects. There should be there by the tail end of round one that they should be able to have their pick from a guy like a J.C. Latham, a Graham Barton, who's more of an injury player, but he can play right tackle, a Marius Mims, who's more of a project player, just over 800 snaps in his career, or someone to that effect. But I think Chop Robinson's going to get overdrafted. I think you look at the speed and athleticism and the traits that he has, the fluidity. Always 6.5 sacks in college, but sometimes that doesn't matter. You look at Jason Owe from Penn State a couple of years ago, and he also had very minimal production, but you look at it as a projection, and you like those traits, and you feel like if you can get that moldable ball of clay, you can make the most of it.
Let me get you mentioned Cooper DeJean, and he's a guy that some look at corner, some look at safety. Some today, he's a Swiss Army knife, kind of does everything. They used him, described him as a Leo player at Iowa. What about a fit for him with Vic Fangio? I mean, is he a corner to you in this defense? Is he a safety to you in this defense? Or would you be intrigued at how Fangio would use him if he was the guy? Because, a lot of people, a lot of Eagle fans, I think, are starting to kind of warm up and like this guy. He's a popular player, played on a defense that was very good. He did have the injury. They met with him, I guess, earlier this week.
Yeah, they did. And look, like I said, I view him as a safety, and there's some folks out there that aren't going to agree with me. Greg Cosell is someone who happens to agree with me, and he's maintained that stance, as have I, throughout this whole process. I just view his skill set, he's a little stiff, but his skill set, his ability to scan and process the middle of the field, be that quarterback on the back end, use his IQ, and use his eye discipline to be deceptive in how he gets quarterbacks to sort of anticipate their throws, and he reads it, and he can pick the football off. And pairing him next to C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who is another player who has tremendous ball skills, I mean, that's a back end right there that all of a sudden you're able to produce some turnovers. And for the Eagles last season, there was a significant drought in that department. I just see him as being that back end center fielder that can really be rangy and make all types of different plays. You can also line him up in the slot. And by the way, he can also help as a punt returner as well. A lot of different things he can do well. I just don't think that he projects well on an island at the pro level. A little stiff, and I think that could be problematic when you're trying to cover NFL receivers.
Yeah, that's a guy that does a lot of different things. Would be intriguing if he was there, if that would be the guy Philadelphia would value over everybody else. Because as you mentioned, there could be some guys falling because of all the quarterbacks. I want to get your take on defensive tackle, because Fletcher Cox retires. He played a lot of snaps last year. Do they trust Jordan Davis to fill a bigger role? Does Milton Williams get a bigger role? We all anticipate Jalen Carter maybe has more in there. But is defensive tackle a spot at 22 that you're saying, if this guy's there, he's the guy you got to get to replace Fletcher Cox?
Well, it is a sneaky need, but eventually the Eagles have to move forward with what they have. You can't keep swinging the bat and hoping to hit a home run. I think they have that home run in Jalen Carter. And Jordan Davis is more of a projection, but maybe Vic Fangio is able to get the most out of him. He's going to be very strict with him and very tough. But you've seen flashes of dominance with Jordan. He has to be able to put that together and sustain that level of productivity for the entirety of the season, make sure his conditioning is where it needs to be. And with someone old school like Vic and the different position coaches that they have, I think you're going to see a reinvigorated Jordan Davis and someone who's going to prioritize conditioning, because now there's no Fletcher Cox, which you said, and he was their most consistent player last season. It's their show, and they know that, and they may well feel the pressure, and they know that it's their time.
Yeah, I know Jordan Davis is a guy who, we just saw Devontae Smith get his extension. They're going to have to start thinking about and making a decision on him, right, on Jordan Davis. Of, hey, is this a guy we want to lock up and sign to another contract, or do we take a guy at 13 and we let him walk out the door because he just isn't what we thought? I'm very intrigued on how Vic Fangio ends up using him in his system.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of one-dimensional just given his skill set. He has not really taken a step forward. Like when he was drafted, I thought that he offered some upside as a pass rusher. That's certainly not going to be his calling card, but I thought that he had some characteristics that were going to translate to the pro level as far as being able to collapse the pocket and get after the quarterback. But he's primarily a rundown lineman, and you don't draft a player like that, 13 overall, which is where I believe he was selected, to be a situational type of player. He has to be able to do a lot more than he has, and he has to be on the field for a lot more than he has. So he has a lot of things to prove this season and some boxes yet to check off. I think with the spotlight on him, I'm really interested to see how he responds to the challenge. And going into this season, he's someone that's at the top of my list along with the Kobe Dean as players I'm going to be keying in on to see if Vic Fangio is able to get the most out of their ability.
Yeah, I agree with you on Jordan Davis on what he's going to be. What about why we're on defensive tackle? What is your anticipation for Milton Williams? He's another guy who's going to be a free agent at the end of this year.
Yeah, I believe so. Man, time flies. Look, I really like Milton Williams. I think he's the best third tackle in the NFL. One of the most underrated defensive player on the Eagles, and he has been for a while now. I think he's going to get a chance to showcase a little bit more of what he's able to do. He doesn't have the long arms. He doesn't have the explosive traits that you look for, but he can do so many different things well. I think he's a lot better against the run than I thought he would be coming out of college. And he can play inside and outside, good hand usage, very physical at the point of attack. I think he's going to get a chance to show that he can be a multifaceted player, rush the passer, play the run. And you've seen flashes with him, especially as a high-effort player. He's been chasing down running backs. Remember a couple years ago in the Chicago game when he did that? He always has these high-effort plays that show up on tape. And I think now you're going to be able to see him have some more consistency and snaps that you can rely on each week. And he's going to have a pretty pivotal role. I don't think that they're going to have a problem locking him up.
Yeah, he's a guy that I like a lot. And I thought last year before the draft, and we were talking about this before the draft, they end up getting Jalen Carter. I thought that maybe would have a bigger role on the defense, and then they get Carter, who I think, obviously swallowed up a lot of snaps there. But I'm interested to see what Vic Fangio does. Does he go with Milton Williams and Jalen Carter, two guys who are a little bit better in the pass rush, but then maybe not as good against the run? How he uses Jordan Davis? Does he rotate them around? Do we see that nose, that five front that we saw a little bit interesting? Byron Murphy, is he on the board at 22? Is he a guy you would like?
If he's the best player on their board, it's hard to argue it. But the Eagles have so many other needs that it's almost malpractice to select a defensive tackle again and continue to do that. Now, it is still a need, Mike. I don't want to dismiss it.
No, you're right. I know what you're saying. It's just, is he that good of a player that you would say, right, if he's there, you got to take, you just can't, he's too good, you can't pass him up? Is he that level of player?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at positional value, it's so much harder to find a quality offensive lineman that has Pro Bowl potential or a corner. Those are the two premier positions, a pass rusher, but there's not really a pass rusher around there. It's going to be an all-pro or Pro Bowl, or aside from maybe Laiatu Latu, and still there's medical questions. But I think positional value, I mean, you could even argue that Byron Murphy wouldn't even or shouldn't even be the top player on their board at that time. You can still address it later on, maybe add a veteran off the scrap heap here, because I do think they need to get a veteran in that room because they're really young.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you can go that route. I think it'd be a little irresponsible allocation of resources there at 22.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw a couple more guys your way, and same kind of thought in your mind. If they're at 22, are they too good to pass up? And it might be at a position where you're like, well, that's egregious. Brian Thomas Jr., I know they have two great wideouts, but would he be too good if he was there, knowing you signed Smith and then A.J. Brown, his contract's going to be coming up? If you took a receiver there, would that be the precursor to a divorce down the road there, but a replacement? Would he be too good to pass up?
Oh, I would take Brian Thomas if he's there, knowing that you put yourself in a good position, knowing that you're not up against the clock with AJ. Like if it doesn't work out, or you're not able to allocate funds that meet his demands, it's not you have a replacement in place. And Brian Thomas still would have to prove it on the field. But I really like what I've seen, and I think that his skill set is going to translate pretty favorably to the pro level. But I mean, adding a receiver of his caliber to what you already have, I think that it becomes how are teams going to keep pace with the Eagles. I think they would just outscore everybody.
Yeah, that would be an interesting. What about Mitchell from Texas? If same thing, if he was there, would he be someone you can't pass on? Or I mean, he's a guy who has been a big game performer.
Yeah, I like Mitchell, but I don't put him in the same category.
All right.
As I put Brian Thomas. I think you can still get another explosive weapon in the second round if you wanted to go that route.
All right. So if that's for the listeners, Brian Thomas, LSU. If he was there, Andrew says yes on him. Mitchell, Texas, probably not. Go to something else. All right. I love, taking a look because we can make the argument, Andrew, that every spot on the field they need somebody except for, they're not going to draft a quarterback, I would imagine. It would be the one spot in this draft that you would say if they didn't draft a quarterback, that would not be egregious. But every other spot on the field, you can make an argument that they need to get younger or add more depth. What about we talked about corner, Nate Wiggins you like. I know he's an interesting guy. Doesn't tackle very much, so I think the fans would probably be less than thrilled with his physicality. Kool-Aid McKinstry would be the other guy. But what about, other than Cooper DeJean, is there any other safety either at 22 or in that second round that you would say that would be a great fit for them?
Jaden Hicks, Washington State, is my top-rated safety in this draft, and gotten largely overshadowed by the Tyler Nubins and Javon Bullard from Georgia. But, man, is he the complete package. He can really do it all. Looking even on day 3, there's going to be some guys like a Bo Braid from Maryland, guys that I've talked to for the Draft Rings podcast later in the draft that I think could be good depth players. The Eagles really like a guy named Evan Williams from Oregon, who they spoke to at the Combine, at the Senior Bowl, and were at his pro day, and they like him as a nickel type of defender. There's just so much talent at that position but my top-rated guy is Jaden Hicks, and I think even the second round might be a little rich for him. Maybe the late second might be where he starts to become in the conversation.
Any chance in your mind that Latu gets down to 22?
Sure there is, and it all depends on, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and you don't know where every team is at in terms of comfortability with this medical issue. He has not missed a game in 2 years. I want to always reiterate that because he seems to folks seem to be really averse to the Eagles taking that on. But if the medicals check out, yeah. He's the best pure pass rusher in this draft class. That's a no-brainer.
So at 22, he's there. Boom, that's your pick.
Yeah, knowing if he's there, knowing that you could probably get, if you look at it, let's say guard, you can get a Cooper Beebe probably at 50 or 53 and still address it. Yeah, I think that Latu is just he's a pro-ready pass rusher, very technical, and he's somebody that's going to be a building block for the future, especially next season. You only have Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith under contract. You certainly have to consider defensive end at that time.
Okay, Brock Bowers is definitely the one. Is there a guy at 50? And we know that tight end's going to be something. Is there somebody that's your favorite, and is there somebody that would intrigue you even deeper?
Jared Wiley from TCU is somebody that I'm quite fond of. He's 6'6", explosive. He had an 81-yard touchdown last season, good red zone, really good after the catch as well. I think he's more of a third-round guy, to be honest with you. Jatavian Sanders is likely viewed as a more well-rounded prospect. He's he's a good receiver. I think he's higher on a lot of teams' boards, and he's probably that number 2 tight end. There's not a really strong tight end class, but I think Jared Wiley is going to have the second-best career out of any tight end in this draft class behind Brock Bowers.
Okay, that's an interesting one. I like he probably would be probably more on the third day. Ben
I say 3 or 4.
Yeah, but Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, right? Yeah, Kansas State. Big dude.
That's Adam's guy. Adam likes him a lot.
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't heard as much about him in terms of because the Eagles are. It's almost I don't want to say an assurance they're going to take a tight end, but I'd feel pretty strong that they're going to leave this draft with a tight end. Big dude, athletic. I don't know. Maybe I watch too much Big 12 football.
No, Ben Sinnott's a great player, man. He just doesn't have the prototypical measurements. I think he can be an effective H-back. He's a pretty fluid athlete. He does a lot of things really well. He's super athletic. He's probably going to become in the conversation in the third round as well. Really good value there. So it all depends on what you like. I don't like Jatavian Sanders' effort as a blocker. He has a long ways to go there. Good receiver, only 245. So he's got to add some bulk there. But I think largely he's probably viewed as the number 2, although there are other players that I like better personally.
All right, I could talk draft for a while with Andrew, but we're running out. That was the quickest 20 minutes of my life right there, by the way. Are you a Dallas Turner? Are you a fan?
No, I think Latu is a better player overall. I think Dallas Turner is explosive and twitched up, and you love that, and he jumps out on tape, but he has an awful long ways to go in terms of refinement. He's a bit raw in certain areas of his game, and, in terms of just pass rush plan, getting more refined with his hand usage and things of that nature, not to get too technical with it, but I think he has the highest upside, but I think Latu is the best pure pass rusher and the more consistent of the two players.
It seems that Turner versus Latu, Robinson, and Robinson are everybody's 5 edges. Would they be yours, or is there someone that you sneak into that top 5?
No, I like that, but I will say for everyone out there to keep an eye on Marshawn Neyland from Western Michigan. There's some circles that think he can sneak into the back end of the first. I think that's awfully rich, but I do think that he can be in the conversation in the middle of the second round. A very aggressive attack-style defensive end. Didn't really do much to jump off tape in 2022, but, man, his tape in 23 was phenomenal, and he looks really polished. Coming from a small school, he checked off a ton of boxes.
This is, a double Penn State year, too, by the way. Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac. You got what was the year that there was 2 Penn State guys battling out for, like, the top 5 picks? Who was it, John?
Man.
Arrington and Courtney Brown, when they were in the same draft together, right?
What was the Yamor Grado Mas or whatever his name was, and then
that was a couple years ago,
and then Owe.
Yeah,
wasn't that the same draft?
I think so. Yeah, that was like 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah,
Yator Gross Matos. That's right. That's who it was, and then Jason Owe.
Yeah, now we'll go back to 2000 when you had Courtney Brown. And,
Courtney Brown was a total bust. He never made it. He was with the Browns.
Yes, and that's what you got. 2 Penn State edge rushers that are going to be. I mean, Chop Robinson, I think, is obviously the Adisa Isaac is also another guy to keep an eye on for the local people out there that like the Penn State guys. Real quick on linebackers, Cooper. I love Cooper. If they could get him in the second round, if they went that direction, that would be great. But Junior Colson, for the people out there who watch National Championship, remember him from Michigan. Do you like him at the pro level?
Love him. I'll tell you what.
All right.
He's my top-rated linebacker in this draft class. I think he's the best in coverage and more consistent out of any of the players down to down. He can play the physical brand of football, but he can also do some good things in space. I think he is a battle-tested player, played at the highest level, and he's a more well-rounded player. Cooper's my second-rated linebacker. My third-rated is Trevin Wallace from Kentucky. I think he's being completely underrated through this process. I've seen him go everywhere from the third round to, depending on where you see some of these mock drafts, he's going rounds 5 or 6, which is ridiculous. He's a day 2 player all day. Explosive, twitched up, violent closing speed, a little bit more raw. He needs to refine his instincts, but, man, he's just turned 21 years old. He's somebody that you put in there, you wind him up, and you watch him go.
All right, let me get your take on Trotter's kid. We get a lot of messages about him, Clemson. Where do you see him?
3rd or 4th round. I'm not as high on him as a lot of folks are. I have him as my 6th-rated linebacker. Just smaller guy. He doesn't play. For those expecting him to play like Jeremiah Trotter Sr., he's a far cry from that. They play a vastly different style. He's more of a he's better in space, but he's smaller. He doesn't handle blockers as well. So the hand usage is in question there. He's also been banged up a little bit. So if you're worried about Nakobe Dean, well, you should have those same concerns about Trotter and pairing him there. That would give the Eagles an awfully small linebacking core.
All right. We'll see it all unfold 1 week from today. And Andrew DiCecco here will have plenty more on Inside the Birds, the Inside the Birds podcast, and, of course, here on the Sports Bash Live. Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN. All right, man, I know it's a busy week for you. It's good to have this conversation. You and I can keep rapping. I know we go back and forth like a pickleball band. Bang, bang, here's a name. You give me this. But I really enjoyed it, bud.
Yeah, I'm blessed to be busy, man. Take care.